pre-submittal conference. This will be the pre-submittal conference for the program administrator, specifically our nonprofit and capacity building program. Before we get started, I want to offer a little bit of clarification. I wanted to alert any of the attendees that this pre-submittal conference is specifically for BACP, which is Business Affairs and Consumer Protection. What we are looking for in this first phase is to hire a program administrator to manage the underlying $3.5 million fund that is associated with this program. This round is not for any of the nonprofits who believe that they will be applying for the grant funding. If you are a nonprofit that will potentially apply for funding from this program, you are probably about 3 to 6 months too early. So what we want to do with this first phase is get a program administrator, design the program. Once we design the program, we will create an application and we will conduct a webinar. And then we will open up the application to eligible nonprofits. Again, this is just our first step. Our first step here is to hire a program administrator. And so what we will do is address questions that are specific to the program administrator, not the underlying disbursement of the grant funding. Sit tight if you are an organization that is hoping to receive funding. Like I said, probably early first quarter next year, 2025, is when that program will be up and running and the fund will be open to potential grantees. So I did want to provide that clarification up front. We do get a lot of inquiries around the program administrator versus potential grantees. So what we plan on doing is going through our presentation here. And then if you guys have questions at the end, we will allow you an opportunity to ask those questions. In the interest of all of our time, I would ask that the questions are specific to the program administrator, which is this program, and not program questions that are specific to potential grantees who want disbursement from the underlying fund. I hope that makes sense. So here's our agenda. I just want to give you the agenda and then we'll walk through the presentation. I'll provide an overview of business affairs and consumer protection. And then we will provide an overview specifically of the nonprofit building program. And then we'll provide you guys an RFP timeline, and then we will allow sessions for questions and answers. So specifically, Business Affairs and Consumer Protection, or as we're known, BACP, it is the licensing department of the city of Chicago. Specifically, we license businesses and public vehicles. We regulate licensed businesses, and we also provide consumer protection from fraud, as well as enforce Chicago's labor laws. And we partner with business service organizations and provide education and resources for those businesses. Within Business Affairs and Consumer Protection, there are 8 specific divisions. I won't go into each of these specific divisions so much as I will go into the small business advocacy and the recovery, economic recovery division of BACP. And the reason I'm going into the small business advocacy group is because this is where the economic recovery team exists. And this is the team that is responsible for the RFP that we will be discussing today. The small business advocacy group, just a little bit of an overview, again, sits within BACP. The small business advocacy group is specifically responsible for supporting the small business ecosystem of Chicago, and we're highly focused on providing economic development. We have an economic or neighborhood strategy team that specifically works with what we call our neighborhood business development centers, our Chicago business centers, and then our COVID-19 vaccination outreach for employees program. And then within that is the economic recovery team, for which I am responsible. I am the team's director. Sarah Beamer is our projects administrator that will be responsible for this particular program. We're responsible for managing federal funding that we receive from the American Rescue Plan Act, or as it's known, ARPA. And we've broken each of those programs into 3 separate categories. We have our small business support, we have our nonprofit support, and we have our food equity. If you want more specific information about the economic recovery team, you can go to the link that is provided in this slide. Also, at the end of this, as I had indicated, we will record this session, and we will provide you guys this slide overview, as well as provide you guys the questions and answers that come out of today's meeting. Back to the nonprofit capacity building program. This is sort of an overview here. The nonprofit capacity building program will be, we're looking to invest in Chicago's nonprofit ecosystem. We recognize that the nonprofits were highly impacted by COVID-19. We saw a lot of requests, a lot of need from the neighborhoods that they exist in, but unfortunately they did not have the resources to meet some of those needs. And so we recognize that the nonprofits ultimately do require some assistance from us. And the way that we're tackling that, as I mentioned at the beginning of this call, is first, we're hiring a program administrator. Again, this is not the actual disbursement of the $3.5 million. This is for this particular step, is step 1, which is to hire a program administrator that the city will work with to design and implement a high-touch capacity building program for those eligible nonprofit organizations. The other thing that is sort of important here is that we have another RFP opportunity out, which is our small business and not-for-profits grant program. That program will also disperse funding. If you are a nonprofit that receives grant funding from that program, you will be required to participate in this capacity building program. Again, I'm not going to go into too much specifics about that other than to just identify that for you in the future. Both of those programs will be designed, and when the applications are available, we will provide webinars so that you guys will have an opportunity to attend those webinars and get all of your questions answered about participating in the grant funding for those programs, as well as any of the technical assistance that comes from those 2 programs. This program here is just for us needing to hire that program administrator to work with the city to design the program that it will ultimately disperse the grant funding. Again, a little bit more information about the nonprofit capacity building program. The city of Chicago is looking for 1 local or national for-profit or nonprofit organization. The budget is $3.5 million. What you will have to do in order to apply for this opportunity as a program administrator is to submit an application through our e-procurement system that is known as iSupplier. You will have to register separately. Again, that's a system that's managed by the Department of Procurement. It is not managed by Business Affairs and Consumer Protection. We merely post our opportunities on that system, and each of the applicants is responsible for creating their own logins and understanding how this system works in order for them to submit an application. Some of you probably already have an account and recognize what the steps are. If you do not have an account, you will have to go through iSupplier to create that account. And then ultimately, once you get that access, you will look up solicitation or RFP number 10384. Once you identify that 10384, that will be the first step in starting the application process. And I'll go into that a little bit in a little bit more detail as I go through this slide here. The contract terms, we anticipate that of January 2025 through December of 2026 is when this program will run. There is no opportunity for extensions as federal funding for this program will have been exhausted. And so there will be no opportunity to extend it beyond the dates that we have listed here. The start times are a little bit negotiable. It all depends on Once we've identified the organization that we want to award this contract to, we will negotiate with them the start of this program. Start is negotiable, the end is not. The proposal requirements, all of the applicants must demonstrate the ability to design and implement a high-touch capacity building program for eligible nonprofit organizations to provide the following services. Again, we want to make sure that it is highly customized capacity building curriculum. We want to make sure that you guys are focusing on outreach and engagement. You will have to design a public website, and we will work with the chosen awardee to on all three of those bullet points. So we do anticipate we're looking for an organization that has experience with such a program. And so we will be looking at what you guys propose. Once you propose it, then certainly we will work with you guys to customize it to fit our expectations. Another important thing is we want to make sure that you comply with all federal and city requirements for tracking, reporting, and audit compliance. As I mentioned earlier, this is a federal award, and so the federal government has specific requirements, and as well as the city, but we want to make sure that you guys are tracking, reporting, and will be in compliance with any of the audit requirements that ultimately comes from a federal award. You want to make sure that you meet all the required milestones for the period of performance. Okay, and so again, the RFP response eligibility, this is what this slide is really going into. We're looking at nonprofit organizations. Collectives can apply with a nonprofit sponsor. For-profit businesses can apply, but the important distinction here is that they cannot make a profit off of this work. It is a federal award, and so if a for-profit business wants to apply, they need to determine if they would be able to work within those parameters where they cannot turn a profit. All of the funding that would be awarded for this program would have to be funding that is specifically spent on the program with no ability whatsoever for a for-profit organization to retain any of it as a profit. The selected delegate agency can include for-profit entities, but they, again, must adhere to the federal regulations detailed in 2 CFR 200, Uniform Guidance for Subrecipients. And when we listed this here specifically because that's the guidance that we receive from the federal government. We are not experts at that uniform guidance. We listed it for a reason. I would encourage you guys to look it up as well and become familiar with it to make sure that you are an organization that will be compliant. We're open to joint proposals and coalitions that would submit an application. However, if it's multiple parties, we're looking for one lead applicant to submit that application. And when they submit that application, they can indicate that they are working with additional organizations. We're pretty open to local and or national organizations, but we will prioritize those that are locally here in Chicago. This last disclaimer is about applicants with existing contracts with the cities that is not in good standing will not be considered for new funding. And in addition, applicants that have a city contract terminated for default are not eligible to respond to this RFP. Respondents that do not meet these requirements will not have their application evaluated, as well as incomplete applications will not be evaluated for this funding opportunity. So back to what I was saying earlier, the way that an applicant applies for this opportunity is to go through the e-procurement system, which is housed on the Department of Procurement Services website, and iSupplier. We also listed in the actual RFP document itself. There is a link to the e-procurement site. What I would encourage you, if you are really interested in this opportunity, is that you get your access to e-procurement as soon as possible. And once you get that access, you will want to familiarize yourself as much as possible with that system. It is not a BACP system. Therefore, we are unable to answer specific questions related to how you guys would be able to submit that application. Our view into that system is completely different than the view of potential applicants who are applying to this response. So I would not want you to waste your time contacting BACP, asking us about how to submit the application or any of the specific questions. What we will do is direct you guys to the iSupplier help desk, as well as the online documentation that they have for that system. It is not the easiest system to navigate, so I did want to give that early warning. So, which is why I'm saying to you guys that it's in your best interest to get access to that system as quickly as possible and learn how to navigate through it, so that you would be able to submit your application by the application deadline. So I did want to provide you guys that information before we move forward. Back to the actual program, we're looking at the budget and the program expenses. Again, applicants who would be a successful applicant would be people who are completing a program budget, and they're specific and outlining all the expenses in its entirety. For example, we want to make sure that you are showing us what the salaries are, what are the program materials, making sure that you've allocated money to market the program, so on and so forth. Anything that's an expense that you think would be relevant, you need to detail that in that budget that you submit. We want to make sure that you list the program staffing and whatever your consulting fees for the program management and administration. We also want to make sure that in addition to you actually running the program, that you have data tracking in place, and that there's some metrics and evaluation that the organization would put in place to evaluate the effectiveness of the program, and just general tracking for us to understand how the funds are being expended and how the program is being managed. Indirect costs, which would include for facilities and administrative fees, may be charged in accordance with uniform guidance at the 10% de minimis standard. Any indirect cost rate higher than this standard requires a negotiated indirect cost rate agreement with the federal cognizant agency. That's a lot of words. For the most part, most people will really be within that 10% de minimis. If for whatever reason you need to be outside of that 10% de minimis, you need to identify that in your budget, and that triggers a whole separate process that will require us to work with you to understand why you need to be outside of that 10%, and for us to get approval from our Office of Budget and Management. The vast majority of people will be within the 10% de minimis standard. Program materials, we want to make sure that all the program materials to design and conduct a program must be valued at less than $5,000. And that's a federal requirement because at that point it becomes more of a capital asset. And so we want to make sure that we steer clear of that. Program marketing and outreach materials, you would, again, as I mentioned, you want to make sure that you capture all of that information and that you provide the marketing so that you can do some community outreach to let people know that the program will ultimately be put in place, where we will be dispersing grant funding to those nonprofit organizations. And then we bolded this last statement here, which is capital asset purchase, specifically equipment or property, is not an expense that will be allowed by this federally backed program. A little bit more details on our reporting requirements. The delegate agency will be required to design and develop a data collection process and success metrics. The City of Chicago expects the delegate agency to work with an external evaluator. The delegate agency will be required to maintain requested data using a city-approved platform and to submit reports, including impact report data, to the city. The delegate agency will be required to provide all data in a dynamic file format, such as Microsoft Excel. Again, this is just kind of a general overview, setting the expectation that we require you to have some reporting tool in place. You can certainly propose a tool. We expect you to propose a tool, and we will evaluate that tool, and we ultimately will have the final say so as to whether or not the data reporting tool that you are suggesting is one that would be compliant and useful. And then these are some, at a minimum, these are some of the data collection points that we're looking at. The total number of nonprofits that will be served, the total number of group and one-on-one workshop hours, pre and post program surveys, and summaries of project outcomes, proposed versus actual. Again, this is specific to once we've identified the program administrator and we open up the underlying grant disbursement program. Once we start dispersing, we want to know all of those nonprofits that have went through the program, either for one-on-one, any of the technical assistance that they've received. We want you guys to report on it, what you project and what you actually did accomplish. That delegate agency is required to keep detailed records on all costs, in addition to any other record keeping required for compliance with federal requirements related to the American Rescue Plan Act, state and local fiscal recovery fund program. Some of you guys have been through working with the city specifically on ARPA funded programs, and so you know specifically what those requirements are. We're not deviating from what those requirements. So again, we're just letting you know that they have specific requirements. And once we award the contract to a delegate agency, we will certainly work with you guys to make sure that you are submitting reporting that is compliant. And then as you submit your application, this is the scoring criteria. We wanted to be a little bit transparent with you guys to let you know that this is how we're looking at those applications. We want to make sure that each application is evaluated the very same way. And so this is the breakout of how we're awarding points in each category. We're looking at the organizational experience. We want to make sure that you give us a good picture of what the organization's visions and values are. We want to know who leads the organization and how are they accountable to the board and the communities that it serves. We want to understand that you understand the needs of the nonprofits and the needs of capacity building ecosystem within Chicago. We also want to make sure that you paint the picture that you have the ability to provide a robust capacity building program. And we're looking to see whether or not you have previous experience, either current or past experience, managing a federally funded program. So that's the first category. The second category we're looking at goes into your program design and implementation strategy. We're looking at how detailed your response is on how the organization will perform those RFPs as listed in this. I'm sorry, we're looking at how detailed the organization is and how they list the activities that they will perform, how that we listed in the RFP. We're looking at your inputs and outputs. We want to make sure that you are really describing what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, what the timeline looks like, what those workshops look like, how will the participants in this program be impacted by the program that you guys are offering. And then we want really good insight as to how the organization will administer the program within the timeline. So again, this would be a good opportunity for you as an organization to really be as detailed as you possibly can be as you're submitting your response to this opportunity. The next category we're looking at is capacity and budget justification. We want to know how much you're asking for in this program. Again, the budget is $3.5 million. We expect that the organization we award funding to will have administrative cost, and so a percentage of the $3.5 million can be devoted to that administrative cost. You need to paint that picture for us as you submit that budget form. We will review that budget form, and then we'll look at what you're proposing to how you fiscally manage the project, monitor the expenses, and keep all financial records. We want to understand your programmatic capacity to implement the proposed program. For example, how many staff members will receive compensation, what's their salaries or hourly rates, and what are their qualifications, and we do anticipate you guys will attach the resumes of those staff members that will participate in the program. And then we also want to make sure that we'll look at what you're proposing from a data tracking perspective and reporting perspective. So again, it's important. Not only do we want this program to be implemented successfully, we also want to be able to see the impacts of that. And so that's where reporting comes in. We will look at what you guys are proposing versus the outcome at the end of the program. And then this last question is important, the overall responsiveness. In the past, we've seen people who don't necessarily answer all of the questions related to the RFP. They will give us 1 or 2 word answers. That doesn't really give us any insight as to how the organization plans on managing the program. So I would, again, advise you to make sure that you take some time and read each question and respond accordingly. Make sure you're giving the proper level of detail for each of those responses. If a question is asking you to provide an attachment, please make sure that you provided those attachments. That is all part of how we look at overall responsiveness, and we do award points based off of whether or not an applicant has responded to and provided all of the answers as well as attached documentation to the application. Again, this is where I go back and say, I cannot stress this enough. If you guys have any concerns about e-procurement, the iSupplier website that is where you will be submitting this application, I would highly, highly, highly advise you to get those questions out of the way as soon as possible. Do not wait until the very last minute and panic before you submit your application. So it does probably, if you are a new registrant, it probably takes 3 to 5 days. Don't quote me on that. Don't hold me to that standard. Historically speaking, that's what I've been seeing, is that it takes 3 to 5 days to get access to iSupplier. So you don't want to wait till 2 days before this RFP is due to submit your request to get access to iSupplier. Do that as soon as possible, so that you can get into the system and become familiar with the application process and become familiar with uploading documents, familiar with how you would answer the questions, making sure that the application is complete. And when you submit it, that you're confident that you've done the best that you can to submit a really good application that will allow us to evaluate it and understand that you would be a good fit for this particular program. And so the contract details, we sort of mentioned it earlier. It is a 24 months contract. It will start approximately January 2025 and go all the way through December of 2026. Again, there is no possibility for extensions. You will have to apply through iSupplier, which I just sort of went over. And then you should only submit 1 response per iSupplier ID. So once you log into iSupplier, they will give you an iSupplier ID, and you will be only allowed to submit 1 application. The timeline, the RFP, this particular RFP closes on September the 23rd by 12 p.m. Central Time. We expect a decision late October. There could be some movement in this. It could be late October, could be a little bit later than October. It just all depends on the number of applications that we receive and how much time it will take for us to evaluate those applications. Again, I want to stress that the application, your application is due by September 23rd before noon. At exactly noon, this opportunity will close. You will not be able to submit an application beyond that. So any technical issues that you've had prior that you didn't get resolved, unfortunately, it would not be enough for us to leave the application open, unless, of course, it was across the board and it impacted everybody system-wide. Then we would allow an extension of that deadline. If for whatever reason, and that's extremely rare, if for whatever reason we would extend it, we would let you guys know. that extension will be open to all of the applicants who had not submitted their application at that time. We will upload this pre-submittal conference to Business Affairs and Consumer Protection's YouTube channel. And the other last statement that we have here is each of these applications will undergo a technical review to determine that all required components have been addressed and included. Again, back to how thorough were you when you submitted that application. Any proposals that we deem to be incomplete will not be considered. And we also reserve the right to waive minor irregularities with the applications. And again, there will be minor things with the application. If we do it for one applicant, we would do it for all applicants that have a similar irregularity. So again, we want to make sure that we're treating all these applications in the same manner. Just making a statement there to make sure that everybody understands that these applications are being managed as fairly as possible across the board using the same exact process. So again, make sure that you get your access well in advance of September 23rd, and two, that you've submitted your application to this proposal by September 23rd. So I would recommend starting it as soon as possible, drafting those answers, take some time, think about the questions, and go back in and make sure that you're thoroughly answering those questions, because we will review those applications based off of that thoroughness. And so that's all that I have here. And then I'll just open it up to questions. Again, I want to reiterate, we will respond to questions that are specific to this program administration RFP. We will not be responding to questions about disbursement of the underlying grant. Once that application process opens, we will host a webinar, and at that time, all potential nonprofits will be invited to participate in that webinar, and we'll go through a similar Q&A process relative to that grant fund disbursement.
All right, Maurice, if you are ready for some questions.
Yes.
First is on program description, there is a section on implement. Recommended structural changes to an organization. Is this written guidance, or is it being an active participant in the implementation of those recommended structural changes?
Okay, Sarah, I'm gonna have to ask you to repeat that. Okay, so can you break that like into two parts and then I'll respond?
Yes, and maybe whomever asked this question, if you could rewrite it in another way. But the question is, on program description, there is a section on implement. Recommended structural changes to an organization. So is this a written guidance, or is it being an active participant in the implementation of those recommended structural changes? I don't quite understand what's being asked here. So whomever wrote this question, if you could maybe resubmit it in another way.
Yeah, I would concur. I don't get the gist of what's being asked. So if you want to take a minute to try to reconvey what that question is, certainly do that. In the meantime, we'll move on to the additional questions.
Great. Other one is also under program description. There is a section entitled Public Website and Clearinghouse. Can you please provide more information on the BACP expectation regarding clearinghouse? What do you expect from a program administrator?
Yeah, so essentially what we're saying is that we want you to create a website that will house all of the materials for the program that you've designed. Again, you're going to design the program in collaboration with the City of Chicago. So we want that information to be publicly available so those organizations on demand can access it, the training materials, any of the videos, any of the documentation. So we will expect that it will be on that website, and that those who want to utilize it for whatever reason would be able to easily access it and utilize any of their program material. And just to add to that, we will work with, we're not tied to a specific type of website or a specific type of software program. We're looking for you guys who would have experience with something similar or implementing a similar program. So our expectation is that this course material would be available on that website. And so if you have experience, certainly put that into your proposal. And then we can, once you submit the proposal, if you're selected, the city will work with you to ultimately determine what that website looks like and what that course material would look like.
Great. Next question. Under program description in the RFP, under create a website is a list of items to include. One is database of relevant consultants or professional services. Can this list include fee for consultants or sliding scale pricing offers for services, or must they be pro bono services like at WBDCs?
I don't think we want to be listing pricing. Again, we can certainly negotiate that well before the website is up and running. The city of Chicago is going to take a look at what is being proposed. I don't believe our intent is to list hourly fees or anything relative to that. Our expectation is that those program costs are covered once we award whomever organization this $3.5 million program. So my immediate response is no, you should not be listing any of those costs. But if you know what those costs are, certainly let's save that, and then you can certainly submit it in your application. Once we get to the point of designing a website, we can talk about how or where that information should reside.
Next question. On the website and content of program, please share your expectations of new original content versus existing content. Meaning, does most of the content have to be new original content in the program curriculum and materials?
Well, again, we're looking for a custom program, right? So it wouldn't necessarily have to be entirely new, but it should be specific to this particular iteration of the program. We recognize that organizations probably implement several similar programs throughout their lifetime. So it doesn't necessarily have to be all brand new material, but it certainly should be custom material that's specific to this iteration of the program.
Next question, will the website be housed/hosted by a city platform? If program, if not, can the associated cost to the program administrator be billed as a program expense?
Yes, they can certainly bill the program expense. That would be an allowable expense. Again, I can't speak specifically to whether or not it will be hosted by the city of Chicago. In all likelihood, you guys, as a program administrator, would make a suggestion to us, and then we will work with you guys on how that website, where the website is housed and how it's presented. I would set the expectation that it would be an allowable cost, and so you should build that into your budget. If that changes somehow, then certainly we could adjust the budget, but I don't anticipate the city of Chicago would be hosting this site. We would expect you guys to come to us with a proposal for what the site is. We will provide you our input because we do have certain requirements around what those sites should look like, and the types of data, how they should be compliant. But hosting the site is an allowable expense. And if you think that that's, certainly put that in your budget as part of your proposal.
Next question, how many participants do you expect us to serve as a program administrator? 1, awarded grants under RFP 10385, which is the current RFP looking for program administrator for small business and nonprofit grants. And number 2, the number to be a part of the cohort through a lottery process.
I cannot give you that specific information at this point. I don't know. That's part of program design, and so we'll work with the grantee and then right size the program and the number of participants after we've made that award. I just don't know at this point.
Next question. I have a program that would help nonprofit organizations develop leadership and organizational capacity, but I'm not the administrator role. How would I apply to be a part of the program?
You can partner with another organization and have them submit the application. They can list you as a partner and what your role would be in that application.
Great. Next question. Target beneficiaries are listed as having headquarters in Chicago. And this might be program design related. So target beneficiaries are listed as having headquarters in Chicago. Can a beneficiary be an Indiana nonprofit with an administrative office in Chicago?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not really sure if that is a question related to the program administrator, or is this a nonprofit that would be applying for grant funding? If it's the latter, obviously this is a City of Chicago program. We would expect that the nonprofit would be in the City of Chicago. They cannot be outside of the boundaries of the City of Chicago. If it is a program administrator, we will give priority to the program administrators that are located in the City of Chicago. If you're located somewhere else, certainly you can apply, but organizations that are domiciled in the City of Chicago would have higher priority.
Thank you, Maurice. Next question. Does the company need to register with the State of Illinois Business Department?
That's a really broad question. And the only way for me to answer that is you have to be in compliance with local, state, federal laws as it relates to any business. If the business is regulated by the state of Illinois, then you would need to comply with the state of Illinois. If the business type is required to be licensed by the City of Chicago, then you'd have to have the City of Chicago required license. I would encourage that business to go to the city's website and look under Business Affairs and Consumer Protection. There is a way to look up to see the business types that are regulated by the City of Chicago. Similarly, I would encourage them to go to the State of Illinois website and do a search to find out what types of businesses are regulated and what the state licensing requirements would be.
Next question. What are BACP's expectations on what percentage of program budget can cover program marketing and outreach? Maybe give us an acceptable range of what percentage of program costs for marketing and outreach.
I cannot give you a percentage other than to say, please, please, please allocate some percentage of your budget to cover marketing and outreach, because what we want to do is make sure that we have sufficiently made it known to these nonprofit organizations that this fund exists. So I don't have a percentage of what your budget should look like, other than to say the expectation is that you put a reasonable amount down in that budget to cover that outreach and marketing, to make sure that all eligible nonprofits are aware that the grant program will be in existence.
Next question. Could you please say a bit more about what is meant by, quote, cannot earn a profit if an applicant for the program administrator is a for-profit organization? This
Yes.
simply means all money awarded to the administrator must be spent on scope of work approved, question mark?
Pretty much. I mean, I think you sort of answered the question, is that for-profit organizations cannot profit off of a federally funded program. And those are specific requirements that come from the federal government. So say, for instance, if you submit and are approved for the budget of, let's say, 3 million, I'm just throwing numbers out there, 3 million, the entirety of that 3 million, it must be expended on all program costs. It can't be 2.9 million with 100,000 left over that is pocketed by the organization as a profit. The entirety of the award must be expended on the program itself through eligible and approved costs.
Next question. Does the upcoming change in the federal de minimis rate impact the indirect costs allowed on this contract?
I do not believe it does, but we will clarify. We had that question in a previous pre-submittal conference, and I think we got some guidance from our Office of Budget and Management. I do not believe there's a change to the de minimis for these programs, but we will clarify. We will get an answer to and we'll provide that in the Q&A document that we send out along with this recording.
Next question. RFP says that the city will conduct extensive check-ins. Will all staff costs and billable hours be reimbursable under the program admin contract?
So you would submit staff costs, whatever you believe, the amount of time your staff would be participating in this program. If it's 100% and that's justifiable, that cost would be covered by the program. If it's 50% and that cost is justifiable, that cost will be covered by the program. Submit what you think is relevant in that budget document. If your organization is chosen, we will review the budget with you and have conversations with you. And if necessary, we'll make some adjustments to that budget. But if staff cost is, if it's makes sense and it's tied to the program and you guys can justify it, we would have no problem covering the staff costs as it relates to the program.
Next question. Is this a totally reimbursable grant, or can one or more advances be requested to fund this?
This is a reimbursable grant. I'm only hesitating because I have to think through whether or not there's an opportunity for this to be advanced payment. So I'll tell you what, whoever answered that question, let me do that as a takeaway, and I'll get back to you with the specific answer on that.
Next question. Will the city identify the evaluator, or is that up to the delegate agency? Should evaluator be included in the program budget?
I would say included in the program budget. We will not identify the evaluator. Our expectation is that the program administrator would identify an evaluator.
Next question. Is it safe to assume the program administrator is not eligible to deliver coaching and technical assistance?
Good question. Um, I would say so. I would say yes, that's a safe assumption. Um, yes, that's a safe assumption. I would not, I would like them to be focused on the actual administration of this program rather than participating in some of the technical assistance programming.
All right, next question. Is the entire 3.5 million for this contract, or is a portion of that for grants for nonprofit capacity building activity?
So a portion of it would be, there's several portions of it. We expect the program administrator to tell us what their cost would be. And then in terms of the actual grant um, percentage, once we've determined who that program administrator is, we could adjust those numbers. I do not know what those numbers are at this point. I don't know the number of nonprofits that we're targeting, nor do I know what those grant amounts will be. Our first step again will be to identify the program administrator, and then we can make some adjustments about how that fund will be dispensed, what percentage will be to the actual technical assistance, what percentage will be to the actual disbursements of grants. I don't know at this point.
And on that note, through this contract, other than selecting the delegate agency, in case this was their question, no grants will be given out to nonprofits out there, direct funding to support their operating budgets or their own capacity building. No money will be, given out to nonprofits to, other than the delegate agency chose to run this program. So I think some people might be getting confused with the other program administrator.
Yeah, no,
RFP
thank
that we
you,
have
Sarah,
out
for
there.
making that distinction. Yeah.
Next question, for the scoring criteria, if you're submitting a proposal as a coalition of administrators, are the criteria applied to the entire group or just the lead applicant?
So it's one application, and so we will look at the entirety of what is submitted. And we won't parse it out because, if there's multiple people that have applied, the lead applicant would be the one that we would ultimately award it to, and not those sub grantees. So the lead applicant would have to do some sort of contractual agreement with those partners and figure out how compensation goes. So we would score the lead applicant who submitted, and again, it would be the entirety of the application. We wouldn't be parsing out each of the responses as it relates to the groups that were submitted. For all intents and purposes, that lead applicant is who we would be scoring.
Great. When applying as a coalition, is there minimum size and operational, is there a minimum size and operational budget or the lead agency required?
No,
Would an organization with a budget around 600,000 be an eligible lead agency?
not necessarily. My response to that would be to submit the application or respond to all of those questions as they relate to the fiscal capacity of the organization. And we will certainly review everything that you provided in that application.
Next question. Can you use a significant part of the budget be new hires, or would we need to already have staff for delivery on staff?
Again, it's going to be up to the organization. I can't be overly prescriptive in providing you guys guidance. It's going to be up to the organization, right? If you guys have the experience, you have the staff on hand, great. If you have to hire, you need to account for that in your budget and your timeline.
Next question. So the program administrator will be using the 3.5 million to hire coaches and capacity building providers, a qualified roster.
Yeah, if that's what the organization needs to do, and that's what they're proposing, how they will implement the program, sure. Each organization is going to submit something different. It just all depends on the makeup of the organization and how they're proposing to manage the program.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of duplicate questions on that 3.5 million, how it's to be spent.
Yeah, I
so
think, Sarah, I think I just want to go back to what you mentioned earlier, and that's to offer a point of clarification. Again, this is a program administrator to identify an organization that will manage the $3.5 million as it relates to the nonprofit capacity building. For the grants program, that's a separate RFP. That's the BACP Small Business and Not-for-Profit Grants Program. That is where grant funding will come from for those organizations to, again, that program has not been designed, but there will be a little more leeway in terms of how those grant funding is awarded. This program here, we're specifically looking at the capacity building aspect of the not-for-profit. So there is a distinction between the two different funds.
I know we're coming up on time. We'll try to get through as many questions as possible. Will the program administrator then hire vendors to have capacity building programs? Or does the program administrator administer, design, and deliver all programs themselves?
Again, I can't be overly prescriptive. You guys are going to have to, we're looking for organizations that have experience managing similar programs. However you administer those in the past, I would suggest you would apply the same logic to how you're going to administer this program. I can't tell you if you should be hiring consultants or if these are in-house people. It's going to be how you tell me. Submit that in your application, and we will put it through the review to see if it aligns with our understanding and your understanding of how we expect a program like this to be put in place.
Looking through the questions now, still a lot of duplicates. Next question, can you share who or what organizations in the past have worked with the city in this capacity of the program administrator for a program simplistic to this?
I don't have a list off of the top of my head. I know we implemented a nonprofit capacity building program last year, and I believe, or the year before. That program, that information is in our public website. Those organizations that participated in that nonprofit capacity building program are listed on that website as well. We can take that as to do and provide you that information in the Q&A follow-up after this meeting. And sir, we're already at time, so I'll allow one more question, and then we'll have to end this meeting.
Okay, great. Last question I've seen a couple duplicates of. It regards to ownership rights after this program has launched, and then the website itself. So this is a twofer. Would the website be usable property of the delegate agency after the contract expires? And on that note, if there's any, training tools or things like that created for this program, along with the website, who retains ownership of that once this program ends?
Good question. And the city does have specific requirements around the intellectual property associated with this program. I do not know the specific answer, and I don't know that I would know that until we actually get into the contracting phase of this program. But there is an expectation that there is a certain amount of availability in terms of number of years that the program material should exist. And we can certainly provide that more specific information once we get to the contracting phase.
All right. Thank you, Maurice. We're now at 1:04, so slightly over time.
Okay, thank you all for participating. As I indicated, we will provide you guys the Q&A document. We will provide you guys the actual presentation, and we will provide you guys the link to the YouTube video of this pre-submittal conference. And if you have any additional questions, I think we listed our contact information. No, we did not. So we will provide you our contact information once we submit to all of the participants all of the documentation that I just mentioned. So again, thank you guys for participating, and good luck.